So we must do two things, two great things together, to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself. I said that this morning we would look a little more deeply into the relationship of the two translations to the Christ matrix, and so I wanted to begin now by doing that and asking you to open your textbook, to if you have your textbook with you, to have it open to page 115 and 116 of the textbook, just so that you can follow as we talk through and walk through these two translations. It will show us the very order that we have there in that first translation, which is God, man, idea. And so what we see really is that science wants to show the operation of the idea in its principle, the word, the general, comes to every specific, comes to every individual, and is forming the individual into the true sense of man, that the true sense of man is appearing. This is individual man. As you look at the definition that she gives of man, it is God's spiritual idea, individual, perfect, and eternal. So man is defined as individual and also as idea. So that when we reach the conclusion of the Christ vertical, where the full God-likeness, Christ-likeness, Christ-selfhood is brought out and established, this individual form, this form, new form of man, will be seen to be of the nature of idea. You see, the first translation starts with God, doesn't it? With the Word, so to say. You think of that going right back to Genesis and seeing what is the reality of things, what is the reality of being. And so now the first translation will work on everything that claims that there is something else, that there is a misinterpretation of that, a mistranslation of it, the claim of another calculus working, and will retranslate that and restore that the true condition, restore us to the original state of understanding God, the understanding as God understands, understanding God's creation as God understands God's creation. And so this is the also the restoring of the original state of man as idea and as the consciousness of that perfect God and perfect man. It's bringing out the one mind as unreality. As unreality. Look at your first degree in the textbook. First degree, depravity. He says that's unreality. Mm-hmm. And so it is uncovering and we see how beautiful that first degree is, if we see it in its context. It's when we take it out of the context of the part that it is playing in the Christ translation that we misunderstand it. We misinterpret what those phenomena are. They are the phenomena of the Christ showing us what is unreal, what isn't real, what does not have a value. So that is the activity, the process of the enforcement of the translation of two-ness into oneness. You can't say, I choose not to accept that. I choose not to accept. You will accept, you see. You will accept it. Nothing on earth can avoid or evade the Christ. So there is nothing that can succeed in diverting the enforcement of that translation of duality into oneness within us. And then we see that the workings of that the awakening process of that, the awakening to see the unreality of that which is unreal, the unreality of the belief of evil, is bringing something out, has an outcome, has a result. And that result is seen in in Christianity. We have the phenomenon of evil beliefs disappearing. All the beliefs in evil that we had begin to evaporate. And this is the disappearance of the belief of evil before the appearing of good. What did we say good was? The quality of God, the expression of God, the Christ sense of the Word. The Christ expressing the Word. And only one thing is being expressed. That's God, and that expression is good. Good, good, good. All is good. And so we have those transitional qualities, a moral state, you see, being a better state, a higher state. And what is the finality of it, really, is the bringing of us to the third degree, to that point of understanding, of perfect understanding. And Mrs. Eddy says that in the third degree, mortal man disappears, and man in God's likeness appears. And we see that this is then the establishment as us, as our conscious form of understanding, the establishment of reality, of what is real. So you get a coincidence. It's like the translations are really like a circle, aren't they? Everything comes out from God, works out the whole proposition, comes back to God. Comes out from the reality of God and works on any claim of anything else, resolves everything, brings it right back to the factuality of the one reality of God. And it's coming to the human consciousness, the human understanding, state of understanding, which is in some degree of depravity, of misunderstanding. It's in some state, some measure of not understanding. Just not understanding. That's all that depravity is. It's just not understanding God. And so the Christ comes to that and begins to work on that. Well, it comes to it and first sets the whole proposition of what it is going to do in the face of this misunderstanding. To work, to do, to operate, to be what it says it is, what it says it is in the Word. It begins to express what it is, and this is a working on depravity then. And that working on depravity is the uncovering of the nothingness of depravity. That is, it's already bringing understanding, already beginning to establish understanding in that overturning. And all those signs that we don't like that come in at the B, like the crisis, and the chaos and the chemicalization and the appearing to be animal-magnetism, are the beautiful, beautiful signs of this activity of the Christ working to establish understanding. Always higher and higher and higher, greater degrees of understanding within us. So that translation process is going on, and as that goes on, there is then the C coming in, the disappearing of the belief in evil, disappearance of evil beliefs, as the allness of good is establishing itself. So there's a great exchange happening, an exchange taking place, a transitionary activity of going from one state or condition to another state or condition. And this is raising up what is referred to as the moral within us. You see that movement actually in the two translations from the physical, from a physicality, a mentality, a consciousness that is all involved with physicality and with physical values, or what it thinks are values based in the physical. Then as the Christ is working on consciousness, there's a raising up. Actually, what's being raised up is the spiritual, but the first appearing of that is something in between, something better, something higher, something holier, but not the holiest. See, it's a comparative stage, I guess you could say. And so we get the moral, we get those better things, a sense of humanity, of honesty, of affection, of compassion and hope and faith, meekness and temperance. All leading to, or all of those will give way to, and you remember how we saw last year in the story of 1st and 2nd Samuel, the David story, how that whole story was presenting the three degrees in a way, giving how that was taking place, how we had Saul representing the physicality of the first degree, and we had beautiful Jonathan, who was the moral of the second degree, and we had David, the third degree. And how the moral was something better. It was the moral had spirituality within it, and as long as it relied on the spirituality, it was successful. It was tending more and more and more toward becoming the spiritual per se. But eventually the moral goes out. Saul went out, the first degree goes out, even the second degree goes out because Jonathan went out. This is not cruel. It's not something cruel. It's showing a spiritual fact that the third degree is the whole point. It's the goal. It's the outcome that we're looking for. And so that third degree comes in And then we would see in the that this is understanding, this is reality, this is the spiritual being established. That's the way it's working. What a joy that is to know that, to understand that in some measure, and to see, therefore, that it is not up to us to make it happen, not up to us to try to be better, to try to be good, to try to do the right thing. So often we talk to each other, and if we're helping each other, the one will say, well, I'll try to do that. I'm going to try. You see, it's living out the Word and the Christ. So, let's just talk again for a brief moment about our input. Our input is the Word. Our input is that law of God, that equivalence of God, that allness and onlyness of God that we have seen in Genesis, in the first and second records of Genesis. Now, this law, this Word of God says, I have the power to establish that. I have the power to carry that out at every point in the universe. Throughout my realm, throughout my universe. That's Christianity, isn't it? Realm, universe. But the carrying out of it to every point is the Christ. Yeah. And so the every point is the individual. That the Word has the power to carry out that law and the understanding of that law in each individual consciousness, in each individual situation, in each individual circumstance or problem of our life experience. The power to execute itself. The Word has the power to execute what it is. Somewhere in the textbook, Mrs. Eddy says something about Jesus being the new executor for God. It's the Christ, always the Christ, be it the Christ in the individual consciousness, the Christ in Jesus, the Christ in us. The Christ per se is that which executes the Word, carries out the will of the Word. You know, when you have a will, you need an executor to carry out that will. So it's the will of the Word that is carried out by the execution of the Christ, the true executor for God. And so it's as though the seven and the four, the divine nature, the divine operation of God, the truth of that which we have seen in the Word is the power. You see, the seven and the four saying, this is what I am. And the seven and the four saying, this is what I am not. Within this truth, within the reality and the truth content of that is the power to execute itself, to bring itself forth, to manifest itself. And this is the comingness. This comes. It comes to every situation constantly, and nothing else is coming. And so we get the first great movement of the homeoraisa of the Christ coming in as the monopotency of God good. This is the only power. There's only one power, in other words. This input is the only power. Is that not clear? Isn't that exquisite? that the truth of the first record and the second record, the truth of the equipollence of God, is the only power at work, and is coming, and we see that it is dealing with the duality, the misunderstanding, the not understanding, which we call the depravity, within the human consciousness. And every problem, any problem that appears to be a problem, a negative problem, is a belief in duality. At its root, it's a duality. It's the belief that the second record is something over and against the first record. That duality is a misinterpretation of the second record, you might say. Yeah. And so that duality has to be solved. It's a belief in another standpoint besides God. And step by step, we see that worked out. And the very first step is the Word as the Word. It is what we call Hosea, the book of Hosea, the prophet Hosea. It's the Word as the Word. The Word breaking in with this great announcement and pronouncement that don't worry, there's only one God, and only one power. And this is the power of good only. And this Word as the Word is the cornerstone of the matrix. And now it's crucial to everything that will follow, and it is therefore a cornerstone within our own consciousness. Where the false belief that there is anything apart from God principle, either to do good or to do evil, will be dealt with. And you see that there's a little latent thing within us that also says there is another power somewhere that can do good other than God. Yeah? This is also part of the suggestion. It's maybe a more subtle suggestion in us that there is a secondary power, a second power for good. And that God doesn't always do good. Sometimes he manifests himself as what surely looks to me like evil. And so all of this is the depravity. This is the form of the misunderstanding now that has to be addressed. And the whole range of Hosea, the whole range of the presentation of the Word as the Word is somewhat like this, that in the first part of Hosea, we are shown how we experience this breaking in, what it looks like to us, what it looks like to the human consciousness, what the human consciousness perceives. It's our concept of God. We are shown our concept of God, how we view God. So you have, in a way, a presentation that is saying, well, actually, God is just always saying to me, if you don't do thus and so, then I'm going to get you. If you don't do thus and so, I will do this to you, and I will do this to you, and I will do this to you. But this is only how we perceive it, with the human sense, with the mortal sense. That we think that God is saying, you've got to obey, and you've got to obey, and if you don't obey, then thus and so is going to happen, and it'll come to no good end, and you'll have evil. there'll be an evil result and you'll go down the drain. All of this suggestion, you see, is a misinterpretation of the fact. So Hosea presents first how it looks to the human standpoint, and then how it really is. How it really is. Because in truth, God is always saying to us, only saying to us, one thing. I love you. And I love you freely. I love you freely, unconditionally. Because behind it all, God is saying, I love you freely. I love you unconditionally. There's nothing you can do that will stop me from loving you, loving you, loving you. You see, lining you up with me, coming to you, bringing you the power of correction, correcting you. This is love, isn't it?